call to order the meeting of the Nagog Hill Orchard Working Group for March 13th, 2024. We're going to take a couple items out of order. Sarah is on with us from a hotel room and has kind of iffy internet, and she wanted to give an update on the wells first.
Okay, thank you for doing that. And I want to thank Matthew for posting the results, which are on the Nagog Orchard website. So Granite State Analytics is back with their test results, which came back fine for irrigation. A little high in iron, but absolutely acceptable for arsenic as well. So overall, all good news. Just as a reminder for people that don't know about the well discovery, we know that we have at least 10 minutes per gallon, and there is presently no pump in the well. Thank you. I go back to the chair.
Okay, so as long as we're out of order, I'm going to bring one item of other business up. It's very short. I'm not entertaining audience participation in this one. Certainly board can, but there's been some questions, some emails flying about public records law. We had some folks at the last meeting who did not want some of their information released in public records. We've had some complaints about public records. Just to be clear, three things. One, this group has nothing to do with the public records response other than to share information with the clerk. The town has its own protocols and its own responsibility. So we shared the information in a timely manner. The clerk got it. She, as far as I know, is following state record law and her timing for response. So this is not the group that sends them out or makes any determinations on that. The second thing is we've had some requests from folks to redact certain information. That's not determined by us or the town. That's determined by public records law. I did pass on to the clerk that people would like some of their personal and financial information redacted from any of these submissions if the law allows it. I don't know the status of that, but that's it. Our sole goal is to pass on that. Our sole responsibility is of any submissions we have to make sure the clerk got them, which we did, as well as to basically pass on any requests from folks to redact information. But everything's being done in accordance with public records law and by the clerk, not this group. So chill out on the emails, please. Okay, so moving on, minutes of the March 6, 2024 meeting. Matthew, thank you for doing those on such short notice. I kind of put it in there tentatively because I know it wasn't much of a turnaround time. Any comments?
Yes.
Too many comments.
No. The woman from the Historical Society, Linda, I think we forgot to like record that piece, her input.
No, I have it. It's like in the third paragraph under historical restrictions. Linda Stein spoke to the group via Zoom. She stated that she spoke to the head of the Massachusetts Historical Commission.
Okay.
Is that what you meant? Like that I didn't, you think I,
so, actually, so some of the, I think where we're going through is just to back up. There are some of the things that we had stated for Linda. So if we can back up, Amy, if we can just back up one paragraph prior to that. So under Brad's historical restriction, we talk about in the third line down, DAR was reluctant but agreed to formally consider adding the house. We need to add the word and barn.
thank you.
Kind of we carry down through, and then it talks about further downward. It says Sarah Seward updated the group on progress to create a historic preservation restriction covering the upper barn, the upper house and barn and land. And then we talk about where Linda comes in, and then we talk further down APR and HR, but a review found no overlap, no concern was adding the house and land and barn. So we have adding in that so Linda's point was we're talking about the house, barn and land. So repeatedly we have to add in the word land, and then two sentences below that again, historical preservation restriction to both of the buildings and land. And then further down, what Linda had talked about says the historical commission will help us if necessary. They had said that the historical commission has offered to help definitely create the forms. So that's not in our wheelhouse. Linda was great to make that offer to help. And then on the third, so sorry to interject, but on the third page where we talk about the assessor, it says Sarah Seward walked the property with the town assessor. It was actually Hannah, and I don't recall his last name, that walked the property And then the third sentence down, it says, this includes the lower band. It should be barn and cottage.
Thank you.
Those are my edits.
I got this.
So
Okay.
I don't have the minutes in front of me, but just to be clear, DAR has not agreed to take the barn and the house in. They've agreed to consider
I
it
believe
somewhat.
that's right.
Okay, perfect. I wasn't driving, I misheard or
Yep,
misspoke.
no, we jumped over that section.
Agreed to formally consider adding the house.
Correct, that's accurate.
Okay.
That was most of mine.
Okay, good.
But on page 2, under soil test, you just spelled Hazel's name wrong.
Yeah, she is
H-A-E.
H-A-E.
Yeah, S-E-L.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other discussion on the minutes? Barring none, I'll take a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
Second.
second.
All in favor?
I,
Okay, so the next item,
I'm gonna abstain.
you weren't here, that's fair. If we not here, or?
No, I
That's
I
fair.
had a chance to review.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the RFI submission discussion. So for the sake of the audience, we put out a request for information. This is not the same as a request for proposal. It's more for us to gauge who's interested, the scope of the interest, and the qualifications of the folks out there. It's largely market research for us, so we know how to move forward in putting out the RFP. So we're not going to discuss individual RFI responses today. We're not going to just at any point, I think, in public discuss the merits or lack thereof of any of them. We're just going to speak in general on what we got out of them and how that can help guide us moving towards the RFP process. So I'll start out discussion on that. Of the 50 we received, I thought there are 3 very strong ones. One which I think could have been pretty good, and keeping in mind there was an RFI, not an RFP. So, people put the commensurate amount of work into that. So it may not have been as thorough as an RFP, but I thought we had 3 or 4 very strong RFIs. I was pretty encouraged by those. The trends I saw in those, it was kind of all over the place. One trend I saw is every one of them wanted to purchase the house and barn and APR land. They weren't interested in leasing it. They were all over the place. 3 of them were for-profit. 1 of them was nonprofit. They varied in their experience and their business experience and their farm experience and how thorough they went into, the funding and that sort of thing. But again, I think they, at least 4 of them at least, were very strong enough in my opinion, and I thought they represent good potential applicants for this.
so I went through and I found a number who had the plan to lease. Number 2, number 3, number 6, number 9, and number 15 was a hybrid. And 1 didn't respond, and I think I didn't review that portion on just 3 of them. So actually, I'm not sure that it's clear that there's a majority. Well, maybe it's a majority, but it's not a unanimous that people want to purchase.
No, I wasn't saying it was unanimous. I'm saying from my analysis of these, and the ones I thought were stronger, among those 4, they all wanted to purchase, not lease.
Okay.
Not the majority. There were plenty of people in there on a lease, a couple wanted to lease to own. But from the ones I thought were strongest, just recognizing trends, in my opinion, the 4 I thought were strongest actually just wanted to purchase.
Okay.
So if I misspoke, I apologize.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay. I guess I had probably 1, 2, 3, 4 that I thought were strong, and of those, 2 were lease and 2 were purchase. So.
So I had 4 that I went ahead and used your rubric. My top 4, 3 were purchase. 1 was lease. Yeah, I had about 4 as well, and the same thing with you. Majority of are for purchasing.
Well, so did I. I had 4 as well. 3 were purchase, 1 was lease. I found it very interesting too, the difference in explaining people's experiences, how they were qualified, or what they were bringing to the table in terms of their previous experience, what their future plans were, how it would involve the community or not. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just to tag the team on, like,
Yeah.
there are people who have multiple years of farming experience, multiple years of various channels of sales to bring in funding. Also bringing in, had different ways of bringing in money throughout the year. It wasn't just like vegetables and that's it, because that can be pretty risky. All of them have the ability to provide demonstration of real owned assets that they've been using. I feel like they can all write a strong business plan, a strong marketing plan. They all have the ability to demonstrate a very thoughtfully laid out, very believable 5-year process of how they're going to start with a financial plan that would back that.
You're saying your top ones had this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I felt they all did. And let's see, what else am I my notes? I think they also, farming is hard. Doing it on your own is exceptionally difficult, and they all either had a couple of people with them as part of their business, or had a wider team to support all the different functions. Like, you can't, farming just requires such a diversity of skills, experience, that they either had a team that had that diversity, or they had a small team to at least start with, that had multiple years of experience.
So one of the things I considered when I reviewed some of the folks who had teams was if they're completely reliant on employees to actually run the farm part of that, if they lose them, there's not a lot of people to replace them. So in my mind, they lost points if the proposed operator didn't have that experience and was simply relying on hired staff to do the farming.
Yeah,
So-
that's risky. For sure. Yeah, I think one common denominator for all of the top scores for me was that they either had agricultural experience, business experience, or best case scenario, agribusiness experience of their own.
Yeah.
And that they weren't just hiring it in, which can work, but is not as promising as someone who can bring those skills themselves.
Well, in my experience, it's risky if you lose that agricultural experience. There's not a lot of folks out there willing to step in who have the qualifications to do it.
Yeah, mine as well. Like, I think I also found that I was most compelled by two things. One was someone who had experience with what they wanted to do. So there were people who had sort of this experience adjacent to what they were proposing,
Right.
which I felt was not a good fit. The other thing that I thought really was compelling was the people who had a plan for the first few years and were realistic about the monetary investment required and had tangible timelines and goals that they were saying, here's how we're going to do it in the first year. We may or may not make money, but this is what we're going to try. This is what we're going to work on. This is what we're going to invest in. Here's what we're going to go in year 2, year 3. To me, those were the ones that I felt had the most legitimate responses.
Yeah.
Sarah, did you have any,
Yeah, I would say that I gravitate towards the ones that had the vision and that longevity that Matthew shared. And I'm most interested in ones that have diverse actions or diverse uses of the land that aren't trying to just wear one hat. Because I think with everything that's going on, not knowing the soils, the climate, I think it's good to be diverse in their goals. And I really am trying to gravitate also personally to who we have to remember why the town was able to purchase this land, which was not looked upon lightly of the Morrisons' good fortune of helping us buy this land. And they really did like agriculture. And I know the Morrison family liked animals as well, in addition to the fruit trees. So I'm looking for someone that really has a rather well-rounded vision.
So I do agree when I was ranking them, the people who proposed diversified operations versus just one thing scored much better on their vision and their business planning part of that bit. And a lot of that's just the market. You don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Well, the tie back to the town too,
Yeah.
and what the benefit to the townspeople would be. To like what Sarah was saying, what the Morrisons originally wanted for the property
Right.
is even, sale or lease, just to tie back to the town and what townspeople can benefit from the operation or operations that are taking place.
So that, there were a couple of my criteria that I sent around that had to do with that. One was, the submitters that were nonprofit or cooperative or in some way benefited the Littleton or the larger community. I felt I would like to give them preference. And the other one was, it feels like someone, if we changed it to not have no fruit trees at all, that would be a negative for the townspeople. So I guess I would prefer a proposal that kept some of the land in fruit trees rather than changing it all to something else.
See, my perspective on that is I really just looked at the business plan. Most of the ones I saw did want some fruit trees in there, but it just may not be financially viable. And I know some of us have a preference for nonprofit. I'm pretty agnostic. I'm not sure the town necessarily has a preference for it. Like I said, one of the 4 I thought were good was a nonprofit, but I based them on their viability and their business plan and their experience. I'd rather have a good for-profit than a bad nonprofit and vice versa. So.
Agreed. I guess all other things being equal, I prefer something that gave back to the town and the community at large.
Yeah, well, I think a for-profit can do that though, particularly they're doing pick your own and a retail operation and things like that. One of the nonprofits really, they're giving back to a broader community, but not necessarily to the Littleton community.
Right.
So how do we weigh that against somebody who's, so that was part of my trepidations and, awarding extra points to nonprofits because, okay, are they expected to serve the Littleton community or just the broader Massachusetts community? So.
And I think, Brad, if I can jump in, I think we also have to realize that there is the aesthetic value that gives back to the town of Littleton as well, when we're not looking at, a lot of houses and development as well. So whether it's, a few days, I recognize from the for-profit, from the private standpoint, that they may not want people traipsing all over the property. And if they open a farm stand, that's great. Or if they have some guided educational tours a handful of times during the day, that would kind of tick my box for that. But I do believe that there is an aesthetic value that the townspeople will have by not looking at homes or large structures.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's largely already protected in the APR though. So, nothing's going to turn into houses with the APR, which we're not talking about getting rid of. So I think they're all pretty much equal on that front.
Yeah, so just talk about the nonprofit for-profit relationship. So, for example, Jamie Cruz's farm, that's a for-profit. It's a very well-run business and she offers a lot of community engagement. She does it really well. And there are some nonprofits where community engagement is not met by engaging the immediate community around them. It has like a broader perspective to it. And I think the challenge in farming is farming is just requires so much labor and time, to expect a nonprofit or for-profit to have to engage the community. That is literally like adding another component to your business. You need the staff, you need the resources, you have to integrate it to what's going on the farm that day, that month, that year. So I don't necessarily, I would like to see some sort of community engagement local because I think people would enjoy that. It's not like a criteria for me because I think it's just putting a lot of pressure on either for-profit or not-profit that might be a really good candidate and just kind of can't sustain, we don't have the resources to pull off a harvest dinner. We don't really want people running around. We'll have a farm stand and people can buy things here, but, we're not offering kids classes. Quite frankly, Jamie does that really well. So let her just do that really well.
I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think to everyone's point, there's a lot of opportunities for community engagement that might not check all the boxes, but checks one box.
Right.
Maybe it's the community at large. Maybe it's a farm stand. Maybe it's pick your own. Maybe it's giving back to the region in general. I did not weigh one of those as more than another. Regarding fruit trees, I did not give that a particular weight. I did take into account what I thought impact would be in the immediate neighborhood of a particular plan. And so the higher the impact to surrounding neighbors, the more closely I was gonna be, I looked
Yeah,
at
I looked at that
the
as
rest
well.
of it.
So two things on the access to the fields. I don't think it's really feasible for many farming operations to offer at least year-round access. I mean, the last thing you want, I mean, I bought my house, I had 1.5 acre hay field, and I used to let everybody go into it. For about a year, I put up a gate. It was, people would abuse it, and if you're making your living off it, you can't do that. Now, but, as far as being interactive and a farm stand and that sort of thing, I think that's great. I did consider the impact on the neighbors as well. They haven't expressed a lot of concern, but I have seen impacts from some of the agritourism activities and that sort of thing that are, shall we say, customer intensive. So and those things tend to potentially conflict with the APR as well, particularly if we bring the barn and the house into the APR. So they did lose points on that one for me. Well, you've been quiet and you're the one on the farm, so let's hear from you.
Yeah, how do you feel about people traipsing around your farm?
Unless they're shooting deer.
A lot of the orchards, they do allow passive recreation and kind of promote that in the wintertime, when the ground's frozen, when there is snow cover, so there's an opportunity for the passive recreation thing. I like the proposals that kind of incorporated sort of a spirit of cooperation, where it was somebody that was focused on perhaps one specific market, one crop, and was looking for a particular area that would lend itself to working with others on the property, doing with the other, whether it was a for-profit that was established that had perhaps a market, and working with other either beginning farmers or nonprofits, making use of the facilities that were there. I think there's a really valuable piece with the cold storage that really could help with extending the season when it comes to harvesting crops, storing crops, and distributing them throughout the year, as opposed to working all summer, having a giant harvest, and everybody's supposed to grab the stuff, go home, can it, freeze it, whatever. If you can dole that stuff out over a longer period of time with the use of the cold storage, there's a benefit to that. I also think that you could further that with someone in a more established farm that was looking for a larger acreage, and maybe transferring some of the larger orchard field into a row crop or a hay crop type of a arrangement, using the well that's at the barn to irrigate around the barn, to the left and to the right of the barn. Those are a little bit smaller areas. The thing that we've come into is just the enormity of the piece and how much it's going to cost in investment to, replant that whole thing into an orchard. Where if somebody could start with espalier apples or something like that next to the barn, where there's water, where there's storage for equipment, tools, etc., and then grow a business from there as sort of an incubator, kind of an arrangement where they could start and grow, but they could also build off the cooperative effort of other businesses that are established with a market already. I do think that there's kind of a benefit as far as the house goes to someone that's looking to buy it outright. I don't see that the community has the means, ability to maintain that house as a municipal building. Paying 2 or 3 times as much to have the work done at prevailing wage rates, I think just puts it out of the scope of reality. Somebody that can buy the house, rehab it, make it livable and useful, it might be on them with the zoning board of appeals if they wanted to do a commercial, something with that on the downstairs or throughout, whether it was, a hostel or a multiple housing units. There's other older farmhouses in the area that have done that successfully, with some acreage with it for, recreation, enjoyment, whatever of, tenants. But just, I think that we've hit on the size of the parcel a lot of times, and in the proposals that had incorporated kind of a spirit of cooperation kind of did it for me.
Is there a clear majority of lease versus purchase that you saw as the most valuable? Were they all leased, were they all purchased, was it a split?
I guess that's a little bit of a challenge because the cooperation effort sort of lends itself more to a lease, with different people, partaking in different parcels. My question was, I understand we can't do either a lease or a sale, but if the RFP was written such that, for instance, the house was to be, sold with 3 to 5 acres and the rest of it was, leased out or, if the house, you could sell the house, you could sell a barn and a certain number of acreage with that and convert the larger field into something for maybe a more established, farm that was in the area and have the funding to rehab the field, the orchard into a field come from the sale of a couple of properties. I don't know how that flows with the RFP.
So DAR, and I don't, would not let us subdivide the APR at all. So if we were to separate the house and have a small farm, it would have to be just on that, the farmland that went with it would have to be that excluded envelope only. We couldn't take any of the APR land. We could include a lease with some of the conservation land, but we can't subdivide and say, okay, we're gonna take 5 acres off of the APR and put it over here with, or the land behind the house. We can't subdivide that, is my understanding, from the rest of the APR.
Well, we could lease it in small chunks, we just can't sell it and subdivide it.
We could lease it, and any owner can subdivide it and lease it. We have a couple of proposals, including one I ranked pretty highly, that propose to do that. But unless we retain ownership, we couldn't cleave off part of the APR and associate it with the house, is my understanding.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there was no one who wanted just a couple of acres, like everyone.
No, there was one person.
One
that-
person did want just a small portion.
Oh, yeah, I remember that was.
Yep.
She wanted it down by the lower barn.
Well, maybe there were two.
Well, the one I'm thinking wanted it up on flat ground.
Yeah.
They wanted a high tunnel for microgreens.
Okay. Yeah, one thing I found interesting is, they, just in thinking about climate change, which, is on everyone's mind if you're farming. One of the things that I liked most about some of my top applicants was that not only was it gonna be a diversity of activity going on throughout the year, is that they were gonna be integrating, animals into the whole system, to help with, weed pressure, and just maintaining the soil and that kind of rotation, I think is important. And just, I think one of the things that's gonna be challenging about this property is irrigation. So, I think anything that's just like really gonna require a lot of irrigation, it might be kind of a tough thing to do in the future. Just thinking about water as a resource going into the future and the climate just getting hotter. Yeah, and just.
It's not getting drier lately.
Yeah, I know. I was at this conference last week and they're like, yeah, this is like the wettest and coldest summer you're ever gonna see for the rest of your life. I was like, that sounds terrible.
Well, every year, 50% of the people say it's gonna be the coldest and wettest, and 50% is gonna be the hottest and driest. And every year, one of them's right.
That's right. But, another thing that, put my candidates in the top was just getting the feeling that they really understood like pest and disease pressure. Just since the storms down south are blowing up so much pest and disease. Usually in the winter, some of those pests just get killed off because of the cold winter. But now that the winters are so warm, some of these things are now just like here they can just be here all the time. They're not there's no like winter kill for them. So someone who I think who seems to me to have a good handle on things like that, already scored high, because I think that's going to become more and more of a pressure for farmers wherever you are, right? The winds just blow stuff up, and if the winter doesn't kill it off, then it's here.
If I may, I think we have to be careful not to micromanage all the details of somebody's business plan coming up. I mean, it's good that we're taking all these different views of the RFIs, but I think we have to be very careful how we, what criteria we're looking at to be fair.
I mean, I've worked with farmers a lot and the challenges they come up against. There's already a lot of challenges in the marketplace and competition in state and federal regulations and how, you know, I think we want to be careful to, if we choose to add in any of those to the, even APR is a challenge for a lot of them. The more we add to this, the more challenging we're going to make it for an already challenging location. So, so we've had a discussion on the RFI. Anybody else want to add anything to that? So, go.
I think it's, it would be helpful for us to have a quick poll on whether we think bringing, if we're successful and could bring the house and the barn into the APR.
That's actually next on the agenda.
Do we think that kills any of the marketability of based on who we saw as the most viable, or what we saw as a viable market? Do we think that bringing the structures into the APR is going to impact?
So the APR will come with restrictions on those houses. So a lot of the agritourism type activities, a lot of the value added processing activities would be a challenge and one had a proposal to turn the house into a three family, aside from zoning, which I think is probably easily addressed. APR may have an issue with that. I remember dealing with once where a farmer bought another APR farm next door to him and had a house and he leased it out to some people because he didn't need it. And APR took exception to him leasing out that APR home. Similarly, I had somebody wanted to do a brewery once on APR property and they wouldn't let them do it. So there are some downsides of putting a restriction on this. I think some of them have potential upsides as well. So we had some, we had some proposals that would bring in a lot of people into those buildings, probably mostly on weekends, which I've seen it happen on some farms where their neighbors weren't too happy about that.
Right.
So there's ups and downs about it, but they do come with some restrictions on that house and buildings if we bring it into APR.
Yeah. I guess I just wanted to check that based on everyone's reading of of the proposals or responses, are we still all in agreement that we should push forward on bringing the
I don't recall,
structures into APR?
yeah, I don't recall seeing any of the proposals that I thought would be derailed by adding the structures to the
Thank you,
APR.
that's the right word.
Yeah.
So a couple of them I think would be.
Some would be.
Yeah, there's one that would make use of the barn, but not the house, if I remember correctly.
No, see, I looked at it where there were some activities proposed, that the barn or the house were an APR, they probably wouldn't be allowed.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think that the house could be very challenging for somebody starting out farming to rehab and maintain.
Yeah.
You'd almost be better off in any other house in that neighborhood and, not have the house part of your obligation.
So one of my top contenders basically said, look, we're gonna deal with this a couple of years down the line. We get too much dealing with the farm, but we do have a long-term plan for it. I thought that was realistic because the house alone is a big project.
Yeah.
But there was only, of my top four, there was only one that would have been impacted, and I think they could probably get around it if the house went into an APR.
Okay.
And that was somebody who wanted to essentially subdivide the house and.
Oh, right, okay, right.
They could do that for workers, but in my experience with APR, and this is something we can talk to them about, is if the house is in the APR, then it's for the farmer or the workers only, not for rentals. I don't agree with that, but that's what they've said in the past.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of need or, as far as putting the barn in, if somebody wants to do any kind of processing or, finished product, whether it was making pies, a brewery, cidery,
Wool
cheese,
processing.
anything like that, that's something that would be restricted by an APR?
I think you need a special permit, and I think what they look at there is how much of what you were processing, the inputs came from that farm. That's my understanding of that.
And if they came from the farm, or the majority of them came from the farm, it would probably be okay.
So like Carlson's, for instance, is largely an APR. I don't know if they're packing house is. But they pack most of the year with their own apples and part of the, or I don't know if they still do, but at one point they used to pack, during the winter, they pack Washington State apples, and I don't think anybody took exception to that. So I think that's how the DAR deals with it. I think you'd have to go for a special permit. And there, again, I think if it's related to the agricultural activity, the processing, then they're much more open to that.
So I guess on that, we should probably continue to look at adding them to the APR. We should continue to look for continue to try to pursue.
We get an update on that after. So since it's, we can always say no. If they say yes, we can say, yeah, we thought about nothing. Have
love
to
that.
raise hell doing that, but but that's also a discussion we can have with them at the time. Say, look, you know, we're going to put this in here. We're not going to charge you. You know, they may be able to put something in there. I don't think they'll want to, but that's a discussion we can have there, and we'll have a better idea of where we stand with this. So I don't know if we're ready to move on to the next discussion, which is sort of the RFP. And the first one is really what we've learned from the RFI process. And do we want to limit or focus the scope of the RFP? Are we ready to move on, or folks?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I think, you know, the first one is the focus and provision. So Karen, as I understand it, we had originally considered putting out an RFP that would allow for a proposal for either a lease or purchase. And I'm a big proponent of lease, but I wanted to leave it open if we can do it. Who knows what we'll get? But my understanding is we can't do that. There are some logistical problems, but I guess there's some legal problems as well.
Correct.
So where we stand is we're going to put out an RFP. We need to determine whether we want to make that for lease or for sale. We can't do both.
So I might suggest we get in touch with the respondent who was the one that I think we all are thinking of, that we ranked highly, that was in the lease camp, and ask them if they would consider responding to an RFP that requires them to purchase it.
Okay. They weren't my top, but that doesn't mean they're not.
Okay.
Karen?
I don't think that's, I mean, I think it's a nice idea. I don't think it's necessary, and that we've established a market for purchase, and if purchase is what we determine to be the most beneficial to the town.
Yeah.
I would love to see this group turn around and bid on it for purchase, but I don't think, I'm not sure we should be orienting ourselves
Well, and
towards.
I guess the only reason I think we might want to orient you, if that proposal for lease was, you know, far better and seemed far more viable than the purchase ones, and I think that we need to consider that.
Correct.
It didn't even show up on my radar screen, so I'm gonna leave that to you guys. If, for those of you who had a lease, do you think it was by far the best one on there?
It was equal, it was as good as the best ones on there to me, like the
Okay.
one that I had.
Yeah, and I think, you know, either, they are interested or they're not, right? If
Fair
they're,
enough.
you know, like, we're not interested in purchasing it for whatever reason, telling them or asking them isn't gonna make a difference. Like, they specifically chose a lease route for a specific reason. So asking them, they're gonna be like, we said lease, that hasn't changed.
But what does it do for us then?
No, I mean,
What do we do with that information?
I'm agreeing with Karen, like, you're right, like, people have said, there are viable respondents that say purchase, and there are more than one of them that we all agree on. We say, I think purchase is the majority.
So, and that's, so if I look at the weight of evidence, I mean, the majority of the folks that we ranked highly wanted to purchase it. I think we can look back at the history of this and look how the town's handled leases before, and let's face it, we haven't done a very good job. We've had town council has actually suggested we sell it in a letter. So when I look at the weight of evidence, it favors a sale. And just from the town's perspective, I think it's just easier and cleaner. We haven't done a good job. It's been, you know, we could have a lease it to somebody and they walk away in 3 years and we're back at square one.
Yep.
We also have to remember that we have people that have been in some of these sessions that didn't submit their RFIs and are interested in the RFPs. So I want to make sure that we're not tailoring 100% to the people that are in the wheelhouse. There are others, prospective people out there still as well.
But how do we know what they want?
They didn't,
We don't, but there was that gentleman, I think it was 2 meetings ago, that had said he was interested in a purchase, but got caught up in the RFI and didn't present. I don't know if it was the last meeting or the one before, but.
I see what you're saying, Sarah, but I mean, we don't know what we don't know, and we've got to look at the weight of evidence, and
I understand that, Brad. I'm just saying that to be open-minded that there may be other avenues out there as well.
Well, I'd be interested in hearing those other avenues, because I think the lease to own is just more than the town can or should take
Oh,
on.
I do not want a lease to own at all.
Right,
No,
so,
get a mortgage if you're gonna.
right,
if you're gonna
so
buy it.
I guess, I don't see any other avenues other than lease or sell.
I think lease to own is too expensive a process
It
for the
is.
town.
I think it's too
important.
risky.
Yeah, I agree,
It's
and we're not,
incredibly risky. I think it's important for, Matthew and I have been sitting in on the budget sessions for the town in general.
Right.
The next few years are incredibly tight.
Right.
And so even if we set aside every other argument for leasing, we would need to have it professionally managed.
Yeah.
And the town doesn't have those kinds of funds.
and we still run into the problem where 3 years ago it's lease to own, they walk away, we're back at square one.
Right, and it's,
So I guess my question, Sarah, is, we have lease to own, which we've discarded. I think we've got unanimity on that. We've got purchase and we've got lease. You had suggested other avenues.
No,
What might those be?
no, I'm sorry, I was jumping ahead, making the assumption that when we're coming up with the criteria of what we've seen so far in this pool, that when we're coming, how they tick the boxes for us as a committee in the RFP, that there might still be other people that have other interests, other farming interests as well.
No, I think we all understand that. And there are some people didn't want to show their cards by doing that, but we've got to base our decision on the evidence we have, not supposition.
but agreed, Sarah, it'll be a clean slate. Anybody who wants to bid
Right.
could bid, and whatever they put into the RFI will not have any bearing on what they put into the
Right.
bid.
So given our three options are sell, lease, or lease to own, and I think we have agreement, we're gonna cross out lease to own. We legally can't go out with an RFP for both. I'll entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion, that the RFP be solely for purchase.
I'll second that.
Is it a motion that the RFP is for purchase, or is it a motion to recommend to the select board that the RFP?
I think we recommend. I don't know, you guys.
I
are the
actually, yeah, it probably is recommended to the select board that but it could be that we have a motion in our group to draft the RFP that way, and then we present the RFP to the select board for approval. That we're talking about.
Well, it's all, there's that whole two-step process of having to declare the land surplus.
Right.
and then-
I honestly don't know what the required process.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we figure out what we want to do first? And the next ones are, what's the process? Because I think we've discussed and collectively have a good idea of how to move forward that
Yeah.
might make that issue somewhat moot.
Great.
So should I make a motion that, the committee agrees that we want to design an RFP for purchase, and that we will gain more information about how to work through this process with the town?
Can I
Is
ask
that
you?
too long?
Yeah, I think let's stick with lease or sale.
Yeah.
And then the process, I think, will unfold afterwards. That's actually how, I do have a question though, and only because I don't want to have to do friendly emotions, all that Robert's rule stuff, because I always get lost when you have those things. Does this include the house and the barn or just the APR? Sorry.
How many parcels could it include? Could someone respond to the RFP that I'm willing to buy this section and not that section?
No.
It's all or nothing for the APR
For
line.
the APR, it's all 52 acres and nothing. The question really is, do we want to include the house and barn in that? To some extent, that's unknown because we don't know whether we can protect it. So I don't know if it's unknown, but there's factors that we don't
Okay,
play.
so if we don't add it to the APR, can we just kick that can down the road in a way and say, purchase the APR land, and if the house and the barn aren't included, then maybe the house and the barn aren't included, and that's a separate discussion during the lease process. Or we can,
Sale.
I'm sorry, during the sale process, or we can fully define it and say, you have to buy everything. I guess we have more
So
flexibility.
I will say
A lot of
from
people, if you don't include that house and that barn in some capacity in the RFP.
Oh, no, I'm not saying
So-
exclude it, I'm just saying don't force them to include it.
let me ask a question so I put this down, when I reviewed them, every single one of the four groups that I thought qualified wanted to purchase the house and barn as well.
Land, house and barn. Yep, I did the same.
And I guess that deciding who the qualified people, what they're interested in might help drive the scope of that motion. Does anybody else look at that in their top?
I don't recall now. I don't know if I don't know if my four top ones had all four of them had the barn and house included.
Mine did.
Yours did?
Mine did, my memories they wanted the barn, but not the house.
There was
Because
one
they
in
already-
the barn, but not the house.
Because they live locally, they're like, I already have a house.
You recall?
I don't, I actually thought that there was one that wanted one, but not the other.
There was one
Okay,
that I recall. It wasn't one of my top, but I think it was other people's.
but I would say that the majority is that they want both, and,
Then we include all of them. We include everything then.
because I don't know what the market or,
Well, and let's just think about this from the practical side of from the town as well. Do we really want to deal with this? How separate from all this? When we have people interested in buying both.
I'm a little gun shy because of the problems we've had with lack of responses before, and I wanted to make sure that we kept as many options open, but, you know, given that we have respondents who have already said, I want to buy the whole thing, maybe that's a moot point.
So I think, I'm guessing where we have overlap and we don't have consistency, we've got at least 3 strong respondents who want both.
I'm gonna attempt this the third time. I am gonna make a motion that we create an RFP to include the entire APR and including the house and the barn
For purchase.
for purchase.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I think we had that covered, but I'll ask anyway. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, we need to do a roll call vote.
Oh, yeah, because Sarah's on.
Remember-
Okay, so, roll call vote, all in favor, Karen?
Karen, I.
Matthew?
Matthews, yes.
Will?
I, Amy.
Hi, Jen.
Sarah?
Sarah, I.
I as well. So it's unanimous that we would like to, the process will roll out after this, but we would like to limit the RFP to purchase of the sale house and the 52 some odd acres with the APR. So, okay. Anything else we need to focus on in this
Well,
besides purchase sale?
Do we want to, I mean, we should probably discuss the criteria that we want to put into the RFP by which we will evaluate the respondents, right?
To some extent, I mean, I think we can do that, but I mean, some of the agenda items further down talk about public process and getting input from the public. And so I think we can talk about some of this, but I think that needs to happen before we draft the RFP. And we need to hear from the public. I think I'd like to hear from the public before we can discuss some of them now, but I do think we need to leave it open that we may hear something that either contradicts what we all think or that's something new that we may want to. For instance, I'm kind of gun shy about drinking establishments in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah,
I don't know if the neighbors, I'm on the other side of town, I don't care, but the people in the neighborhood might, I'd like to hear from them. You know, similarly on the nonprofit front, I'm agnostic. I'd rather have a good nonprofit than a bad for-profit, vice versa.
as long as we talk about it before we draft the RFP,
Yeah,
I'm fine.
and it's not to say we can't discuss some of it now, I just don't think we can settle it all yet.
Fair enough, okay.
So while we're here though, let's discuss it.
So we're just talking about like criteria that we wanna have?
Yeah, so we've agreed it's gonna be a sale of the house and barn and that, but what other, I mean, obviously you need to look at the 4 major parameters we have, their experience and the funding and that sort of thing. But do we want to put any weight towards nonprofits? How do we want to craft the community interaction process, you know?
I don't, for me personally, I think it's not about whether they're a for-profit or a nonprofit. I think it's about the demonstrated experience, and the financial, that they have the financial capacity to do it, and the resources to do it, from the get-go. Like, you've already been doing big work, and that can just be expanded here. So, you know, being able to demonstrate, like, I farmed X number of acres, right? Like, if you've only been farming 1 or 2 acres, jumping into 50 is gonna be really challenging. So the number of years you yourself have farmed, I think, you know, is part of that mix. I mean, farming is so complicated, and just because, you know, you farmed a really big piece of land, you might not have done it for a long time. So, you know, I think, yeah, the number of years, the number of acres.
So I think some of the criteria we already have in the I think are gonna transfer over. Those are just the basic ones, the experience, the funding, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm also interested in, and this may be too much for right now, but, they need to provide us, a business plan for 5 years. I want to see a business plan. I want to see them demonstrate what channels of sales they're gonna have. I want to have like a pre-loan approval document. I want to see a letter from the bank, like what cash do you have on hand? If they have received any past, USDA, MDR, NRCS grants, and that they are private funding, whether it's a private investor or whether it's foundational, they can manage that money and meet the requirements of the funding and the outcomes.
So under the funding bucket, which I think was part of the RFI, we need more, we're gonna expect more detail and more along the lines you've discussed. I don't disagree with that.
I still will advocate, and it sounds like I'm the only one for, something that benefits, and it could be the larger community as in Massachusetts, Boston area, or just Littleton over a strictly for-profit. But I think it's probably more important to think about the way that the farm interacts with the Littleton community and the immediate area, both in terms of concerns about traffic and noise and so forth, but also like, look, this was a social thing. It was pick your own, it was farm stands. It was like a little bit of a community social hub. Like, let's not completely lose that, because I think that a lot of residents feel like that's what they had in that orchard and that's what they want to keep.
Yeah.
So I would give some preference to that. I wouldn't say that's the most important thing, but I would like to add it.
I would say all or almost all of them have some component of the community interacting, or could easily add the piece with a farm stand or
I think
educational resources, like even if it's like farmer educational resources.
the size of it, I think, is beyond the scope of somebody that's homesteading to be, self-sufficient or something like that. Strictly, so just because of the size of the property, you're going to have that, whether it mention the passive recreation, you're trying to draw people in to sell a product, produce a product and sell a product. So you'll have that community interaction. Anyway, yeah.
So I don't have a problem with that. I think, I spend half my time dealing with corn, soy, and wheat growers, and nobody ever goes on those farms or wants to. To me, it's what does the community want? And I think I think details of that, whether pick your own's enough or whether we want tours or education, or I think I'd like to hear from the community, and we're further down on the agenda, we have public listening session.
Yeah.
So again, I'm open to that. I just, as far as detail, I'd like to hear from the community as a whole, what they want.
Yeah, something else I'm interested in hearing about, and this may be more narrative and qualitative than actual like quantitative measurable data, but I would definitely like to hear, what are their farming practices? Or is it agroforestry? Is it silver pasture? Are they gonna go for the organic certification? Managing water and land and soil, and how that's all going to interplay in building biodiversity and the ecology, for me is really important. And I think anyone who's doing that work will just benefit from it. Like that type of interplay of that relationship and keeping all of that going, I think will benefit any farmer or farming organization down the road. And there's more than one way of getting there, right? Like you don't have to be, have the organic certification and then the label that's just above it to be able to do those things, right? I don't want to sort of like wall it off. I think sort of, being able to do those things. I'd like to hear how they're going to get there and manage those resources, because your farm doesn't stop at the property line, right?
So I guess part of my concern with that is its values. Like you and I aren't going to agree on organic.
Yeah, I know.
But I do want to make sure that, we've got a whole myriad, and we'll tell you, state and federal laws that get people to where their environment. That's the baseline. Yeah, I'd like to make sure people are doing IPM at a high level, and I'm going to rank somebody higher who's got knowledge in that, experience in it. And it's kind of like, I'd rather have a good farmer using IPM than a modest farmer doing organic.
Yeah, who lets, who has the disease, who doesn't understand it, and
Right,
can't manage it.
so I think we have to be careful of interjecting our own values one way or the other in that, so.
I think we're pretty well protected also because the property is an APR, so it has to be farmed. So weather and markets and technology are going to dictate how somebody farms. So as, you know, education changes, as markets change, as, you know, weather and crop preferences change, that's going to be pretty well controlled. Again, because of the size of the property, they have to make the property turn a profit. How they get there is, you know, the more inputs you have as far as a more intensely farmed piece, you have more risk, you have, you know, higher economic demands. So that's all gonna be self-regulated by somebody that's trying to make the farm pay for itself.
Yeah. So organic might be great, but if they don't have an organic market, you know, it gets harder.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
You know, and I don't think we're gonna be dealing with too many people who are able to do no-till on that property.
Oh,
but,
no,
I
that's
mean,
like
you know,
super hard.
But I mean, people are already moving in that direction where they
Yeah.
can. I think, you know, nutrient management's already dictated by the state, you know, so I think, it's already a
The
challenge
APR
doing the state and federal laws.
Yeah, but the APR doesn't dictate nutrient management.
No, DAR does though.
Yeah, but not the APR, that's not the driver.
No, but there is a provision in the APR that says you comply with state and federal law.
Mhm.
And there is a state law around nutrient management.
So to be continued, I think that conversation, I think having community input for that is important, and we will do that.
I agree.
The right, whoever we end up working with to draft the RFP will also be there for those public, hopefully would be there at those public input sessions, and would have sessions with us and help us craft some sort of rubric that takes into account all these values and helps us create some
Yeah.
sort of objective scoring system based on those.
And I'm okay with community values. If we get a majority of people want something, that's different, but I just want to make sure it's not mine or yours or individuals.
Right, and I think, you know, a consultant can help us craft that in a way that's objective and removed from any, you know, one person's perspective.
Do you have any thoughts of when we'd like to start to host some of those meetings?
That's kind of the next agenda item. Sarah, let's wait, make sure we close this one up first. So do we have any more discussion on kind of the focus of the RFP and what the provisions might be? We've settled on it, sale of the house, barn and APR. You know, we do think there's going to be some community interaction degree involved in that, but I do think we need more input from the community before we define that more fully.
I have a question, which is, do we want to have the consultant discussion now or at some other point in the agenda?
Well, we've got, so I didn't put these in any particular order, but under item 3, the RFP discussion, we have contractor interview and update.
Okay.
So why don't we do that next and we can have that discussion under that
No
one.
need, just as long as we, as long.
No, I think it's important we have it first because we're gonna have community listening sessions. The timing of when we get that contractor, if we want them to do community sessions is pertinent. So that's a good point. Let's move it in. So the next agenda, unless anybody has any further discussion on kind of the focus.
Is it too late to have the sale on the spring town meeting?
What do you mean by the
A
sale?
vote.
A vote on it?
So I think where we left last time is before we can do anything, we're supposed to get either the select board or town meeting to declare the property surplus. That's ideal before we put out an RFP. So I think the question is, I don't think we're gonna get the RFP approval onto the community, onto the town meeting for the spring, do you?
There's some question, well, just to rewind a little bit, there's some question as to whether we would have to, whether we could put the RFP out, whether we could even issue it before we get approval.
Right.
To do so at town meeting. The most recent response from town council is that we could move forward based on approval from the select board only.
Right.
And then if that's the case, then we would be going to the town meeting once we have issued the RFP and have somebody in hand who's a clear, who's a winner, and then we say, okay, we issued this RFP, we've got we've got a bidder, and now we need your permission to sell.
So I think it's a very tight timeline to have the RFP issued and us to declare the most likely candidate by springtime.
No, we
meeting.
won't. I
We
guarantee
won't.
we won't.
Yeah.
The
I was being polite, man. Come on.
But there's another way to do this.
Yeah.
Is my understanding, and that is to go to spring meeting, request permission at town meeting to sell
Yes.
to whomever wins.
Well, there's
And we've talked about the
There's-
pros and cons of that before.
a couple options we've talked about. One is, I think, bottom line is that boils down to declaring it surplus and that sort of thing and stating our intention to sell. My understanding is the select board can approve that or the town meeting can approve that. But in either way, I think we've talked about doing something at town meeting so people aren't unaware when we come up, at the fall town meeting, is, hey, we got this guy who wants to buy it, or woman. So, I mean, that's part of the process is, do we want to go to town meeting and declare it surplus and state our intention to sell? Do we want to just do a presentation at the town meeting and do that? I'm fairly agnostic on this.
It seems like it would avoid a popularity contest or something like that that somebody doesn't want this person to have it or that person to have it, for any particular reason, where if you get the permission to sell the property first, then you know what you're doing to draft the RFP.
And it gives the potential bidders more certainty because they know that if they win, if they have the best bid, they're going
And
to.
certainly
They
would
have
help.
permission to move forward.
So can I suggest that we go to town meeting with a proposal to declare it surplus and sell the property?
Yes.
Well, spring
Yeah,
town meeting.
I think I'm skeptical that will be any better than coming to the town with a solid proposal. In the past, when we have had financial articles that were not well defined, we got a lot of pushback from people. And I think that if we don't go to town meeting with a number and a plan and a purchaser, that people are gonna be feeling like we don't want to give you the permission to sell it without our approval to someone that we don't know.
That was my concern as well, but I mean, I can also, the flip side of that is we go in the fall and say, hey, we found this person, they're gonna buy it. They said, what do you mean buy it?
Well, no, we should definitely either ask for it to be declared surplus and say, this is because we're gonna sell it, and or do a presentation and say, we're gonna sell it at this town meeting. Like, we should absolutely do that, no matter.
So we're gonna make the presentation there. I think we might as well go ahead and get permission at the same time.
Okay,
I mean, I get what you're saying. For
Yeah.
me, I want to know who we're gonna sell it to, but during the presentation, say, we're looking for permission to sell this. We're gonna have to come back to you with whoever's buying it for your approval again,
In either of
because we
these
do have to
two-
come back to them when we sell it, right?
well, I thought you were saying we get pre-approved, then we don't.
in either of these two processes that we're talking about, doing it either way is one way more beneficial to get somebody in there sooner, so they don't miss yet
Well,
another.
the certainty, certainly if we went to Springtown meeting and they said, yeah, go ahead and sell it, we think it's a great idea. There's more certainty for the purchaser. The flip side is though, I think some people are gonna be a little bit reticent to sell it without knowing who's gonna buy it, what they're gonna do with the property. So were me going to town meeting and voting, before I voted on it, I'm with you, I wanna know who's gonna buy it, what they're gonna do with it.
It's got the APR restrictions on it, so they're gonna buy it.
I know that, you know that,
But
but
that's a communication from us.
in anything, we need to do some communication at spring meeting on where we're going. whether we
Yes.
We are going to do that no matter what.
So, the
Can
only,
we sort of just break it down, like go a little bit more slowly, like do a presentation and get maybe like a non-binding approval to sell it?
We could.
And then formally ask for like real permission to sell it in the fall?
So we need to know whether we need to go back in the fall. If we get a permission to sell, we need to know whether we need to go back with a specific offer in the fall.
Yes, and we need, I think one thing we're not thinking about is
The more certainty we can provide potential bidders during the RFP process, the more likely we are to get bids. So that's a really compelling argument to me that, and maybe we're gonna have, maybe it's a communication thing, maybe we're gonna have to work our tails off to present our case to the town and make sure that everybody understands why we're asking for this permission. But I do think that the risk, right, of this, as Will puts it, a beauty contest, is potentially really problematic
So that's
for
a good,
potential bidders.
that's a great point. If we went and said, we need your pre-approval because we do not want to let this place sit fallow for another year. And if you approve and allow us to sell it, we're still gonna have to come back and say yes. But now the person who bids on it is gonna have the assurance that at least once town meeting has voted to sell it. So they are not gonna be as scared of it. So that does seem like a decent thing to do.
I think erring on the side of transparency, I think that's the better way to go. And I think predating that town meeting, we need to have a public listening session, at least one, if
Yeah,
not two.
absolutely.
And we should do those on the sooner side, because I don't want to waste all this effort for somebody to say,
All right.
people come up with pitchforks because we're talking about selling it.
So what I can do is schedule some time with town council and with town hall. Is there anybody who wants to be on that call with me?
I can do it if you want, depending when it is, but I wouldn't, don't hold it up if I'm not around, but I'd be happy to participate.
And we'll.
Karen, I can help too if you need help.
Okay, and we'll make sure that, great, so.
So the goal
Sure
is,
that we've got the process nailed down and that we want to try to get approval.
Right.
To move forward, that provides as much certainty to potential bidders as possible.
Right.
Is that the process? we're
yeah,
going
so
forward?
the goals are, we're gonna do at least one listening session, public presentation and listening session. We will go to town meeting with a similar presentation based on what we're learning and state our intention to sell it and why. And get permission at that town meeting to sell it, but with a caveat that before we actually go to sell it, we make a decision who the buyer is, assuming they approve it at town meeting, that we will come back with approval specific to that buyer.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
And I can start working on the public presentation because I will just go back to the presentation we did in the winter and just start making amendments to it and updating it.
Okay. I think key to that is gonna be really letting people know that if we sell it, it's still gonna be in agriculture. I know there are a lot of people concerned when they didn't understand that this was protected and they thought we might be trying to do away with the APR and all that stuff. That's one of the main things we need to present. Beyond that, I think, and as well as why we think it needs to be sold, given, and after that, honestly, I just wanna listen. But I do think we have some questions we wanna ask, like, okay, if we do this, what level of public participation or do you want with the farm? Do you expect any of that, that sort of thing?
Okay, so we will, Karen or I will go to the TA and we told them on Monday that we were gonna have an article on the warrant to leave as a placeholder. So we will go to them and say, we want an article that says, we want approval from the town to sell this property, we want it declared surplus, maybe, depending on what town council says. And
Right.
we'll do a short presentation first.
Yeah, and a short presentation, I think how we word that article is probably key as well.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Who writes the article?
Town council, they have all the words that they need.
I know, but it's lawyer words and they
Yeah, it's
confuse
lawyer
people.
words, but that's the only, that's
It's not lawyer words when it gets to.
And-
Yeah, that's true. The AG likes lawyer words.
Yeah, and will we use like the USDA map in that article so people can kind of understand how the properties sort of divided up?
I think the simplest map we have is the best, because I'm still reeling from all those goddamn maps, to be honest.
Like, that stylized one I made with the colors, that's probably the one too.
Yeah, colors are good,
Pretty colors.
and let's focus just on the APR and just on the house and barn and all that self-help or whatever you call it. We can make mention, there's other wine that may be available for lease, but let's leave it at that.
That's all that would be in the RP.
What's that?
That's all that would be in the
Yeah.
RP anyway.
Right, so it's just, but it gets confusing with this parcel and this one's self-help and this one's, it's too confusing. Let's focus on what we're focused on. Okay, so timing of that, when is town meeting? May?
May 6th, I think.
All right, so we don't have a hell of a lot of
We
time.
do not.
So it'd have to be like in April.
When does the warrant close?
Usually it's 40 days before the town meeting,
I
so,
looked this up, some.
It's like now, isn't it?
it's getting there, yeah.
But we
Probably
already,
another couple.
they already
weeks.
saved the warrant, so,
Yeah,
but I think our goal should really be to get that public presentation / listening session out there as soon as possible.
I know we have at least one more select board meeting before the warrant closes, so
Okay.
2 weeks.
And I mean, I think I'm not sorry to the folks on Littleton TV. I'm not usually a big fan. I don't watch it, but this is one I think we need to get on Littleton TV.
Yeah. So how about if I do this? Should we host it in the library again?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great place.
So I'll call the library tomorrow and find out what, maybe like Sundays, is that, like you guys, the town does listening sessions. I don't know if you have found that a certain day or a certain weeknight draws a bigger population.
It's basically event driven, like the large people come out for something they care about. It doesn't matter when it is to some extent. Like, I think evenings are probably better than during the day.
Are weekends better than evenings?
I don't.
Yes, I think so.
You think so?
I think
Like
weeknights-
Sundays after.
I think
really
Sunday
busy.
after church for people go to
Yeah,
church.
okay.
Sunday afternoon's probably a good time. Very few people work that day.
Okay.
You know, they've got their kids in tow anyway, so.
And the last time we said Orchard, we filled the room pretty
Yeah, we did.
solid.
Yeah. Yeah, great turnout.
So you're gonna look for some dates that
Yeah.
we have can have the search room.
Yeah,
So I would suggest as soon as possible, but we need giving us time to prepare for this, you know.
yeah, I
update
mean,
the presentation.
ideally, I would wanna just, have the time to kind of revise the presentation and then share the slides, you know, for feedback from the group. You know, the 14th or the 21st would be,
Of April?
yes.
Yeah,
But
okay.
we also have to try and get feedback if we're able to envelop the house and the barn in the APR as well. So we're making an assumption, which I think is a good assumption that we can do that, but for that meeting, we're gonna have to have that nailed
So
down.
I don't think we're gonna have the APR rectified by, April 21st. I think we need to be open that we're working on this and this is our goal and where we stand. And it may be an APR, it may be a historical restriction, I think, and I think both of those, or at least the APR, I think is gonna take a couple months to straighten out. But we can make it clear in the RFP that that may be a condition of the purchase and sales.
So I have deadlines. I found them. March 25th is when the warrant closes.
Okay.
March 25th is also the deadline for boards, committees, commissions to submit articles in draft form.
Well, I think we can do the article beforehand. My real concern is that people start seeing the article in the mail before we have this listening session and discuss the details with people.
So they typically mail them out to arrive 14 days before the town meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, the town delivered to post office, mailed by Tuesday, April 23rd.
So if we did the 14th or the 21st, it would be before the.
yeah, and that's good timing because it's fresh in people's mind when that booklet shows up in the mailbox.
Well, I mean, the report goes to the printer on April 8th.
Well, like I said, I think we can draft the warrant and put it in there.
Okay.
We want to have the listening, the community sessions.
We want to make people verbally aware before they read it and say, what the hell is this?
I see. I thought you were trying to time it in between.
No, I just want to make sure they get to hear
from.
from us before that shows up in the mailbox.
Yeah, no, that's a
Can the
great
notice be
call.
put in the warrant article that there's a listening session? Or is
So I think we're
it-
trying to do the listening session beforehand too.
Yeah,
No, I don't think we can do that.
And we want to do it beforehand. Okay. All right, so we got the focus and provisions, we got the public listening session, the public presentation. How long do we have at town meeting to present? It's pretty brief because nobody wants to be there all night.
5 minutes typically for those presentations before an article.
Okay,
So it'll be quick.
I
okay,
think
we
we could
could,
shoot for 3 and go to 5, we're fine.
yeah, go to 3, shoot for 3. Okay, so we got the public presentation we're working on. I think we've closed the loop to the extent we can on that. We had talked about getting a contractor to help with some of this. You know, I know I've spoken to some folks with Karen's spoken to some folks, Karen and Sarah spoke to somebody. I'm gonna defer to you on all this, basically. Where do you think we are with what do you think we should do, and what are the contractors, the ones we've spoken to, how do you think we ought to proceed?
I think we could work with either one. I think, probably, there's some advantage to working with the party that town council proposed,
Carini or
or
something?
excuse me, not town council,
Town administrator.
yeah, the town administrator proposed, just because he's got a lot of municipal.
I thought his experience is a lot more pertinent than Landvest myself.
Landvest offers a lot of experience in land,
Right, and sales and that sort of thing.
but not the municipal aspect that I think we kind of need. I think, oh,
Frank?
Frank,
Yeah, so, I mean, Frank knows ag law inside and out. He knows, APR law inside and out. But he's nearing retirement. I think we've seen he's not, I mean, I can ask him again if we want to bring him on, but I don't think we can rely solely on Frank from what I've seen.
yeah, okay, so I think it makes sense.
So who will, sorry, I didn't mean to
No, that's
interrupt.
okay, no, go ahead.
So we have someone with strong municipal experience, but who's gonna add the agricultural side and advisory as well?
I mean, I can talk to bring Frank in. He didn't respond to you, which didn't leave me with a good taste in my mouth. So,
Yeah, but, folks get busy,
so if I talk to Frank,
folks' emails don't load for,
so I can talk to Frank and, see if he can help and come in with that experience.
I think it'd be helpful, but, we've also got town council to advise us on land, the land side of it as well. It's gonna have to go through town council no matter what. So I think in terms of the farm experience, Amy, to answer your question, I think it's here. And so I think what we would be getting is somebody who can translate, so to speak, what we're looking for into something that is
Legally appropriate.
exactly, something that we can take to, put out on the street that's not gonna get kicked back for being deficient in some way.
Okay,
Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm perplexed that they sent us down the wrong road though, temporarily. But yeah, I do agree that the last person with more of the municipal background, I think is definitely the way to go.
Okay,
But I think
yeah, they did give
we
us
need
some
to
bum
solidify
advice on,
quickly.
but
is that on, having to?
that was the only issue of
Yeah.
whether we had to basically, declare it surplus property to propose it.
Yeah.
But that's a nuancnced issue. I'm
I
not terribly
think it
worried
wa-
about
I
that one.
mean, I don't know for sure. My impression is that it was fairly nuanced and that even, even within our town council's offices, they debated it a bit.
Yeah, so that was fairly,
So it wasn't like a black letter law thing where they
right,
didn't know.
so they disagree with me, but even with that, I can see why they did it. It's not a clear cut issue, so I'm not gonna hold that against them. And when I look at the breadth of their experience overall, I think they're superior for what we want than the other ones.
Karen, do you need a
So-
motion to go ahead and do that, to talk to town administrator and go with them?
Sure.
Should we have a motion?
Yeah, so I'll entertain a motion. I forget, is it Perini or something?
Santilli.
Santilli.
What's his first name?
I get the right part of the world.
So I move that we sign a contract with Ray Santilli to help us draft the RFP.
I second.
All in favor?
Roll call.
Aye.
Sarah.
Oh, that's right, sorry. Karen,
Aye.
Matthew,
Aye.
Will,
Aye.
Aye.
Sarah,
Sarah Seward, aye.
Brad, aye, so unanimous.
Will you follow up with town council?
Yeah,
With that town
I'll
administrator?
take care of it.
Okay, so APR update, so just as background, I'd approached the commissioner on this, on putting the house in the barn into the APR. She was open to it. She directed us to a member of her staff who oversees it, was much more reticent. The AR has traditionally had two concerns with putting buildings in APR. One is the cost of purchasing the APR goes up when you start putting a house and a barn into there, so they get less land. That's not pertinent in this case because we're talking about adding it at no cost to the APR. The other one is they have had issues. There was somebody down in Westport who bought a beautiful APR overlooking the river and then put a McMansion right on the top of that and never farmed it again. They did put provisions in the APRs, which is in ours now as well, which basically has it's called an affirmative covenant to farm. So, if Will buys an APR and sets up his McMansion estate and doesn't farm it, there's a provision where they can come in, it's called permanent covenant farming. They say, we're gonna lease it out from under you because you're required to farm it. With that said, DAR was still very reticent, to the point where they even suggested selling the house and barn and then rebuilding another barn on the APR property, which personally I thought was kind of stupid because the whole point of the APR was not to build stuff on it. But long story short, I reached out to Jamie Eldridge's office with the intention of asking him to weigh in with DAR. It got kind of caught up in staff. Karen called him and we had a call with him this morning. And he understood where we're coming from. He agrees with us and he has a call with the commissioner next week to encourage her to accept the house and the barn into the APR. So we should have a little bit more information, next meeting on where that stands. So,
Great.
did I miss anything, Karen? Okay.
I'm sorry, who did you speak to after, who was the contact at DAR that you were?
So
Speaking to?
initially the commissioner and then David Bialy, you were on that email exchange. So to give Mr. Bialy credit, he did point out that the state farmland action plan does encourage including the whole farmstead and not just the land into that. So he did offer that, which I wasn't aware of, but I've been using against him ever since. So.
Okay.
All right, next meeting, we've got a every other week schedule, and I, at least for the time being, I suggest we stick with that,
So the 27th, I believe.
whatever the calendar says.
Yep, 27, yeah.
We may need to do an interim meeting as we get closer to this and that sort of thing, but I think,
Like if we have to approve something for the town meeting, for example.
right, so we can stick another meeting in
But
between.
we could do Zoom and just do like a 5-minute, like
Yeah.
everybody read this on email and then approve it over Zoom or.
Yeah, so we can play it by ear, we can do a Zoom meeting, we have to, we can always get together with a quorum of us.
Okay.
Can we take questions from applicants on Zoom or people in the audience?
Sure, are there any questions? Let's start with the audience. Any questions or comments from the audience?
Not from us.
How about online?
So,
iPhone 2, can you identify your name and address, please? Not gory details of the address.
Right. No gory
Hey, Hazel.
details. Hello.
Hi, Hazel.
Hi. So I just have a quick
Hazel with
question.
an A and an E, right? So.
I know my parents did that to me. It was a great evil. But so I just have are you going to disclose your rankings? I guess I'm feeling stuck because I'm realizing I focused too much on my business experience and not on my, like, I didn't realize a big biography was required. And I was like, oh no. And then also like I put in my proposal, like we have sheep, and we've had them for 25 years. And, part of the reason I had done another proposal for the Patton homestead in Hamilton. And one of the things that became an immediate sticking point was that I just you can't permit pet dogs in with your sheep. And they wanted, you cannot have dogs in with your sheep. People couldn't come and walk their dogs on those properties if we have sheep there. Yeah. So they basically, that was a no fly zone for them. They wanted the property to be accessible to dog walkers. And so, I guess, having submitted the RFI with all the, like, now I can see flaws, like, are you guys going to disclose your rankings? Because if we need to be able to let people walk their dogs on property, I would.
Two things, Hazel, at least from my perspective, I think there are any number of operations where it wouldn't be in the best interest of the farming operation to allow people to walk their dogs on the property. So I don't think we will require that.
Okay.
Second one, as far as rankings, I don't think we're going to disclose them. We didn't necessarily disclose them. We didn't follow the same format or any of that stuff. We didn't do it with the intention of approving anything. With that said, any notes we kept are obtainable through public records law. Not that I want to go down that rabbit hole again, but the law's a law. So
that's fine.
If you request them, we will provide them. You won't see a lot of consistency between us. Again, it was more market research than anything.
Oh, okay. No, that's totally fine. I didn't know if I should continue if there was like already within the Littleton community and the town, if they had said, well, this needs to be accessible for people to walk walk their dogs and
No.
enjoy for
And-
public use? Okay.
And even if we heard from a number of people at this public listening session that had to be open to dog walkers, I think I would, and I suspect most of my colleagues here would oppose that. One, there are plenty of places in Littleton to walk your dogs. I know I live by one, I get a lot of dogs going by. And two, very few of the operations were proposed are compatible with dog walking. I mean,
Okay.
you're growing vegetables, the state laws against it, so
Yeah.
you won't get kicked out for dog walking.
Okay, no, that's lovely. Even this spring's lambing season, like I cleaned up a lot of dead critters, and I just don't. I have like a little PTSD from it. I want to make sure that the community, if I put a proposal forward, just personally, me personally, like that the community would understand that, like that one type of operation sometimes precludes having that sort of.
I think
access.
most farming operations preclude at least at some point during the season having public access.
Okay, well, we're in agreement there. I'll mute myself now.
Okay.
What are you
ma'am.
gonna do?
Oh.
What are you gonna do about all of the coyotes that are up here?
I can
Melissa,
tell
can you
you-
identify your
well-
name and address, please?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Melissa Crow, 52 Nagog Hill Road, right at the top of the hill.
Well, I can tell you. Oh, sorry. I can tell you
Hazel,
this.
if you could take your hand down, are you talking to us or
Oh.
Hazel?
Oh, I can tell you as Hazel that I've had sheep for 25 years. I have never lost a sheep to a coyote, but I have lost probably 50 plus to pet dogs, period. Full
Yeah.
stop.
So Melissa, I can tell you from our point of view, we're not gonna do anything about the coyotes. They're back to life, in Littleton, and the farmer, depending on what their operation is and what their risks are, there's certain legal means you can take to manage them, and I'm sure if the coyotes are a risk to their operation, they will take action, but, as far as the town, nothing at this point, unless we have reason to believe they're rabid or pose a public safety risk. Does that answer your question, Melissa?
It does, and it really was for Hazel because there are a lot of coyotes up here.
Yeah, anybody anywhere in Massachusetts who raises livestock is well aware of the coyote risk. Ma'am in the back, you go to.
I'm Joanne Jerry from Howard Avenue. I see that the town meeting warrant closes on the 25th and that the next meeting is the 27th. Are you gonna try to get public listening sessions in before that, or?
No, we're gonna do a public listening session before the warrant is mailed.
Okay.
There won't be any, any warrant article that we bring to this town meeting is going to be a little bit more general. It's going to offer the land up, declare the land as surplus, which is the first step before we are allowed to sell it, and potentially asking the town to allow us to sell it with the knowledge that we will come back in the fall with a specific offer and a specific approval from the town.
Right. So input from that public listening session is really going to be geared towards it's got two goals really in my mind. It's to get input for the RFI and how we here and how we want to craft that and what we want to include in it. And also people to help give a heads up before town meeting on what we're thinking and doing. But I don't think the input from the public listening session will impact the proposed warrant.
It'll impact the RFP.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so, Joanne, my goal is to try to get the starts room on April 14th to the 21st of April, which is before town meeting.
Right.
Oh, it's spring break.
Yeah. So that would really impact turnout, I think.
The Sunday after, do you think most people are back by the Sunday before school?
I mean, speaking for myself,
Like
I
the
would be there,
28th?
but as a resident, I would not have my you-know-what together.
Mhm.
Yeah,
After
so,
being gone for 6 days to turn around for a meeting on the 7th.
so maybe try to go for April 28th for a public listening session?
What day of the week is that?
That's a
That's
Sunday.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
So that will be my goal date. And if anything, if it's not available, maybe I'll go.
So the 28th would be the first. I think we could, absent that, I think we could go back to the last day of spring break as a distant second
I think
choice.
it's mailed out on the 27th.
Delivered to the post office on the 22nd, mailed on the 23rd.
So it'll be after that. We'll do
So we'll be
it.
having the listening session, but
We'll have to do.
So if we go to the 28th, it does mean people are gonna get that warrant.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
They'll probably get it.
Most likely.
That might like freak people out and will drive people to the meeting, and you want a high
And
attendance,
we can
right?
advertise it.
But we want
well
people
ahead.
going into the meeting knowledgeable about what we're trying to do, hopefully, but if we can't do that. I would personally do it on the last day of spring break, but I'll bow to consensus on
No, I
that.
mean, well, I don't think it was consensus, I think it was just me. So,
But what's preferable to focus on the committee would be doing,
28th, I think the 28th is fine,
okay,
but we may not be able to get the room, so maybe we'll have to do it on the 21st.
okay.
if it's the 21st, I can be there.
Okay.
So it's not a matter of my.
I would prefer to do it before town warrant, but I don't care that much. Before people see the warrant.
Why don't we shoot for the 21st? If the turnout is terrible, then we hold another one on the 28th.
Or post it, put the,
Do we want to split it up and do two?
Shoot,
put one online,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I might not be able to do the 28th. I'm gonna take my kid to go look at a college up in New York State. Let me figure myself out and find out about the room.
Figure, the room's gonna drive a lot of this. I think we've got a split opinion on whether we want, how badly we want to get the public meeting before the warrant goes out, but I
But
don't
we
feel
don't
terribly
all
strong.
need to be at the public meeting.
No,
No.
you don't.
I think it's important that we get it out before, that we have the meeting before the warrant goes out in the mail.
Okay. So then the 21st.
21st.
Other people feel strongly, one way or the other?
No. I can be there.
I think it cushions the, or gets about the rumor mill or gossip
Right,
going on.
exactly.
That's my concern. People are gonna get this and,
Yeah, no.
Littleton Mom's webpage is gonna light up,
I
right?
think that's a really good point. And we're shooting for the afternoon sometime.
Yeah.
After people eat, not before, please. Ask people in the audience, do they feel strongly for or against sale? Just as kind of pre-market analysis here.
Still listening.
Still listening, that's fair. Yes, ma'am.
I'm fine with the sale. It's just one of the things I'm concerned about is that we were given guardianship of this land and we didn't take good care of it. And now we have the opportunity to, we're still in guardianship of it. And then now we're turning it over to somebody else. And so I think that there needs to be a lot of work ahead of time to make sure that the criterias that we're looking for with the people that we're turning this over to are going to not only be a successful business plan, but also be successful within the community, and also to our environment, to our history. That piece of land there's nothing else like it. It's a very special place, not only just for Littleton, but for our history of our culture and our nation. So I think that there needs to be real understanding who we're going to be turning this over to.
Right.
And if there's provisions that we can put into it so that if it's a long-term relationship, that if there is changes with what crops they use, that if they are going to have to start farming in a different method, that we have provisions set up in place that we're protecting our natural resources, like Nagog. We've got the forest that's neighboring to the orchard. So I think there's a lot of other layers that need to be considered, not just the farming component, and the financial component.
Yeah, so we can probably look for you at the public listening session to come forward with that. From my perspective, one is, I don't think anybody could do a worse job than the town's done in managing that land. And secondarily, just remember that before we sell it, we're gonna come back to town meeting with a very specific proposal for approval too. So before people approve that actual sale, they're gonna know who's coming in there and what their plans are.
Yeah.
Joanne, yeah.
So I guess, I'm sad. And remembering when the town decided to set the land aside at town meeting, quoted in a Littleton Independent as the town's towniest town, Mr. Russell stood up and spoke for it, and town meeting voted yes, and that's why we have it. So I'm sad that it won't be an orchard anymore.
It may be, it may be.
But, that's pretty expensive. My understanding is that Vincent Cooper actually planned and planted it for the Morrisons. So there's a lot tied up in that land. I do think the idea of selling it to someone who will own it and, you know, we didn't do a good job managing it as a town. And I think it's more likely to be better managed by someone who owns it for their own posterity, you know, their kids, their business. So I think that's a good idea, but I hope we can be very selective.
Don?
Yeah, I guess my concern on selling it is what assurance you're gonna have that they'll use it as intended. You think for many land use provisions, such as in planning boards and so on, does something, they put a bond aside in case they screw up or abandoned it. Even chapter 61 is the tax lien, there's a recourse there. And so I'm not coming with a solution. I'm just saying it's a challenge.
Yeah.
What assurance that you're not, something weird isn't gonna happen? Mention the Westport APR example. And there are probably a lot of examples where people go bankrupt, die, things change, things you don't expect ahead of time.
Yeah.
So just looking at, the benefit to the community, the expectation everyone has, we're all on board to have it viable and useful and work with the community, be a benefit of the community. But you do lose so much control in selling it. I understand the arguments for selling it.
Yeah.
I've talked to Ryan quite a bit and a lot of discussions. I understand that, but there needs to be some sort of assurance in there, either conditions in the purchase or sale or something. I'm not sure what those.
Well, think about what those might be. What I will say, having dealt with a lot of APRs around the state and actually made some changes to the APR law and examined those pretty closely, the worst case scenario I think we could expect is for somebody to abandon it and not farm it. Kind of like we've done now.
Yeah.
But it can't get any worse than it already
Although we
is.
had more control, we just didn't assert it early.
Well, we had the theoretical ability to control it. What we haven't done, we've never controlled it well.
Yeah, no, I
You know,
understand.
So the worst case, I think, is we end up with something like we have now, where the property is abandoned and neglected.
But you have much more flexibility in trying to manage it, recoup it, or rectify it. Because once it's sold, it's, people.
In theory, anyway.
Yeah.
In practice, we haven't done a very good job.
Well, and we don't have the
True,
money.
but that's two different things. You have more control under lease. And I'm not, this isn't confrontation, I'm just saying.
I'm not being confrontational, I'm just giving you my opinion as
There's a
well.
lot of control, so think about what insurance you could put in there.
I think the APR program offers a lot of assurance that they would step in and get the property managed.
Right. So one of the things in the APR contract is an affirmative covenant to farm. So if we do get a wealthy person in there in terms of, and it's not really set up for that. That house is too close to the road, I think, for the kind of estate that's been a problem. But DAR, at least in theory, has the authority to come and say, hey, you're not farming this 52 acres. We're gonna lease it out from under you because it's in the contract.
But what if they do okay with APR and they try to flip the house and barn or something, because they see some financial advantage, even minor?
Well, we've, as you've heard us many times, we are trying to attach the house and the barn to the APR so they can't flip it.
Right, and
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Or they do something strange or.
But keep in mind, we could also end up with a select board in 20 years, decide we're short on money and we can sell the house and the barn and make a good profit. I mean, there's no guarantees with either the town oversight. So I understand your concerns. What I would ask you to do, both of you, if you have ideas on how we can put restrictions in there that will help protect against that. They need to be balanced against keeping that farm, giving it the flexibility to remain viable. Please bring that to the public listening session and we'll consider including the RFI if they make sense.
It'd be worthwhile asking around some of the knowledgeable people, even the people you're going out to help with the RFP. Because, they also have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And, even anecdotally, it's worthwhile trying to cobble together something that gives some assurance from.
Yeah, well, that'll be part of the process when we bring them in, but we're also looking to the community. So if you have ideas on what your concerns are and how we might address them, the one thing I would ask is, again, the more restrictions you put on a farm, the difficult it is to make a go of it. So they do need to be balanced out. I'm not saying one automatically outweighs the other. They need to be balanced. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right or refuse.
You've got a hand up.
Just want to add one thing though, given how the town has allowed that property to deteriorate, in recent years. Anything is better than this, and I don't think, leasing it, I don't think the town has the commitment to oversee a lessor. To hold
We agree.
their
Yeah.
feet to the fire.
That's largely the premise that brought us to where we are today.
Yep.
Hazel? Oh, sorry, we're unmuting you. Hazel?
Okay, I've unmuted. Have you considered putting like a buyback trigger clause in the purchase agreement? Because I would, as a respondent, I'd be amenable to that. Like, it actually could be a benefit. Like, you get somebody in there who's purchased the property, they realize they're in over their head. I'm just, giving sort of hypothetical examples, or they haven't been able to turn a profit, or they go bankrupt. And there's a trigger clause that says they can go back.
I think what you're talking about is a right of first refusal.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
if they go
sort
to
of,
sell
yeah.
it, then we have the right, that's already ensconced in the 61A. And I'm assuming
Yeah.
anybody with that property is gonna put it in 61A, but that's a
Yeah.
good idea that we consider putting it in the deed.
Yeah, and
That's
I'm just saying, like, as a respondent, I would have no problem with that at all. Saying, like, well, if I failed to uphold for some reason the deal, then I'd be perfectly willing to say, like, oh, there's a trigger clause in here, and it goes to first respond, right of first refusal, and the town can buy it back from me.
So what I think would be hard for us to force them to sell it, but what we could do is that they went to sell it to somebody, we could put in a right of first refusal where the town could purchase it. And then we already have that with 61A, at least so under 61A, the town has a right of first refusal. So if Will has land under 61A and he goes to sell it, he wants to sell it to me for $1 million. The town can step in and say, no, we're going to exercise our right of first refusal and buy that land for $1 million. That's only good for a year while it's in 61A or for a year after, but that's an excellent idea, Hazel. I think that's something we can explore in the resulting contract and probably allude to it. Obviously some lawyers need to look at us and tell us why it won't work, but we will try. Apologies to any attorneys. Yes, ma'am.
I know you guys are considering, the community in, your criteria that you're evaluating it. I don't know if, doing like a community impact statement so that those that are putting their proposal in, actually they themselves present to you what their impact would be in the community, whether it be negative or positive. I know like there's environmental impact statements. You could do a statement of your farming philosophy and methods that you're either wanting to use.
Right. So I think I think it's almost a given
Their
in
name,
the.
please. Can we remind that they have to state their name and address, please?
Kristen Kazokis, 6 Cottage Way.
So, after the interruption. So, what I think you will definitely see in the RFP will be some provision that asking them to describe how they will interact with the community, add to the community. The exact wording of that will be, in large part determined by the feedback we get from the listening session. I can't say we're going to do everything somebody suggests, but if we see a trend and it seems to make sense, and if we can put it in there, we will do that. So once again, we'll be looking to the listening session, folks in the listening session. Whether we do a whole formal community impact statement, I think that might, I'm not sure it's within the scope of a lot of good qualified candidates, but certainly within their RFP response, they're going to have to tell us how they plan on interacting with the community and adding to it. And again, we'll be looking for more details from the public listening session to figure out how we might craft that.
George.
George, unmute.
Okay.
Okay, George, go
Hey,
ahead.
can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep, please give us your full name and where you live.
Oh, my name's George Tierney. I live at 74 Wilder Road. I was just wondering if there's a proposed price for the ARP land once it's included with the buildings.
No, we do have an appraisal that was done by Landvest, which is kind of a place to start from. I think we'd like to get as much money as possible for the town out of this. But I think probably more important, or at least equally as important as the price, is making sure we've got a good operation on there.
And the appraisal's available on the website, on our webpage, on the town website.
Yeah, I understand that, or at least I think that I read it right, that on the appraisal, it said that the APR land, not including the buildings, was appraised at $265,000.
Whatever the appraisal says, George, that's what it is.
Yes, but does that increase with the buildings being
Yeah, the
added to
buildings
that?
come with their own price, which is significantly more than the land itself. With that said, I don't think our primary concern is getting as much money out of this as possible. It is an element of what we'd like to do. I think our primary concern is getting somebody in there who's gonna manage the land well and successfully and be part of the town.
And invest in it.
And invest in it.
Alrighty,
So,
thank you very much.
and that's key. If we're gonna sell this thing in a fire sale, we wanna make sure that that difference goes into the land and the buildings and brings it up. So it's something the town can be proud of rather than ashamed of.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
George. Joanne, can you, again,
Yeah.
for Sarah, can you tell who you are?
Joanne Deary from Harwood Avenue. So just wondering, like, what happens to the proceeds from the sale of this? Could it get earmarked to like, to protect other land in town, or like, is that not a thing?
I don't know, actually, if there's any obligation for us to put it into the general fund or.
Currently, there is no obligation. I don't know. I suspect we could say, hey, this goes back into our farmland purchase fund.
Right,
That's a little beyond the scope of this group,
right.
but not beyond the scope of any citizen to propose that. Personally, I think it's a good idea,
Yes.
Yeah.
as long as we don't lease it out again. I don't know.
Well, if it's a farming, wouldn't you want to lease it out?
It depends on the property. I mean, if you've got a hayfield or something, I think those are probably most appropriate for leasing.
Or just to buy conservation land.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd like to see it devoted towards farmland. We've had some loss of farmland in town that have upset a lot of people. I'd like to see any proceeds from this go, this is just me personally, it's not the scope of this. I'd like to see it go into a farmland purchase fund. So, you know, we had over on Cricket Lane, we had that parcel that went, that I think was a shame. I understand why. You know, we had next to the development down past Donalds that went. I don't know if we're gonna have enough. But having a fund to purchase farmland, I think this would be a good start. It's a match for community preservation funding that could be used for the same thing. So I think it'd be a good idea. I do think it's beyond the scope of this committee though, so.
Melissa Crow, you want to state your name and address, please? And I can't, there you are.
Yeah,
You're unmuted.
Melissa at 52 Nagog Hill. You said you were talking about where the funds might go, and I'm just wondering if you were selling this farmland to buy farmland. I'm just confused about what you just said.
So when we purchased the farmland at Nagog Hill, it came with an APR, which restricted it and kept it in farmland altogether.
Yeah.
And the town put out a fair amount of money for that. We'd like to recoup some of that. We will recoup some of it if we do move forward with the sale of Nagog Hill. I think what's been proposed, and again, is outside the scope of this committee, is that any proceeds from that be put in a fund to purchase future farmland that comes up and is available for the town.
Why would the town want more farmland if it doesn't know what to do with this?
Well, I mean, I think we've decided what we want to do with this. So there's two options. We can purchase it, and we often have that option through a right of first refusal where the land's been in 6-2A. It doesn't mean we have to lease it out again. We could then turn around and sell it to a farmer. We probably put a restriction on it first to say it stays in farmland, but the town can then, again, and some leases I think the town is capable of. We do lease out some hay land and some other things. There's far less involved in this and requires less oversight and maintenance.
I think the point is that we would buy it to protect it as farmland.
Exactly.
Because what's happening to the farmland is it's getting turned into developments for large houses.
I got it. So you buy it, put an APR on it, and then you can, okay, got
Exactly. And then you can lease it or sell it.
Right.
Thank you.
And I think we would only propose to lease it where if it was a very simple, straightforward lease.
You said the L word.
I know.
Anyway, thank you, Melissa. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
And do we need to do a roll call on that?
No.
No, okay.
Every guy knows 7.